Morning, everybody. On this cold day in New Orleans. Bill, you sound terrible. I'm gonna mute you. I am Phyllis. I'm here in New Orleans. If you hear any crazy loud noises, it's because parades are happening a block away from me and people are traveling up the street to them with their carts and their children. So I am going to start by reading our motto and then our land acknowledgement, and then I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves, so I don't forget to do that. Eracism is the slogan of the group Erace, which was formed in New Orleans in the summer of 1993. We seek ways through person-to-person communication to show that we are committed to treating all human beings with love, respect, empathy, compassion, and humility. Join us. Erace is an organization that does not espouse any political party, and we have no religious affiliation. We believe in acceptance of all people, and no personal attacks of any kind will be tolerated. We come with the intention to listen, learn, and not to argue. This is the land acknowledgement. We begin today by acknowledging that what we know as the United States is the ancestral and unceded territory of many indigenous peoples, and that there are many more nations and tribes that could be named here. Members of our meeting group today are on the lands of the Chitimacha and Choctaw in New Orleans, the Creeks and Cherokees in Atlanta, the Tonkawan, Lipan Apache and Comanche in Austin, the Lenape and Piscataway in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, the Wampanoag and Nipmuc peoples in Boston, the Cahuilla and Mojave in Riverside, and the Lumbee in Fayetteville. We thank their ancestors for being stewards of these lands through the generations and through today. We need to protect and honor the history and people of these places. Despite centuries of colonial theft and violence, we should always remember that we are all still on Indigenous land and it will always be Indigenous land. So I'm going to call on people to introduce themselves. If you're muted, you can unmute to do that and then mute back again. And Louise, do you think you could be my timekeeper again? You're muted.
Yes,
okay,
for sure.
Thank you. And will you introduce yourself?
Okay, I'm Louise, and this is Bootsy. Hopefully he'll be with me for the most of the meeting. But being a member of Erace over 2 decades, first in New Orleans and now in Austin. And I do love and learn from our meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Stanton.
Good morning, Stanton in Austin, and I've been coming for about a year now. Thanks.
Marva. Marva? Can you introduce yourself, Marva?
Good morning. My name is Marva. My name is Marva, and I've been coming to Erace post-Katrina.
Annie.
Go ahead, Marva.
And I look forward to this life.
You're freezing up a little bit.
Oh, and not being hurt. Oh,
you're freezing. Your picture is definitely frozen. Do you want me to come back to you and see if you get it sorted out? Okay.
Oh, okay.
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 Cindy?
My name is Cindy Morse. I live in New Orleans, been coming to Erace about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. I don't know how long. I need to go check, and I don't know quite how to check, but I'll try to figure it out. Thank you.
Thanks. Dee Dee?
Hi, I'm Dee Dee. I'm in Riverside, California, and this is Diablo. And he's a little camera shy, but he's a cuddler. And I've been coming to Erace a couple years and totally enjoy it. Otherwise, I would not get up at 8 in the morning on Saturday.
We appreciate that you do. Nancy?
Good morning. I'm Nancy. I'm located in the New Orleans area, and I've been coming to Erace since June of 2007.
Thank you. Pedro?
Hey, good morning. I'm Pedro here in Austin, or outside of Austin. Been coming for about 2 or 3 years and thoroughly enjoy it. I may need to take off a little early today. I got some work-related stuff that's I poorly managed once again. Really enjoy these meetings, and thanks for having me. I know we're not supposed to ask any questions, but can you, at some point, you mentioned Apache and some other tribe in Austin. I'd love to know what that other one is.
The Austin tribes are the Lipid Apache, which is one group.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, the Tonkawan, the Lipin Apache, and Comanche.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure thing. Teresa?
Good morning, I'm Teresa. I'm in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Been coming since last August. And Louise, when you introduced your cat Bootsy, I immediately thought of Bootsy Collins. So I've got like their music running through my head, which is a wonderful thing.
That's who is named after.
Oh, that's a fabulous namesake.
Bill?
Morning, I'm Bill Ives and been coming to Erace since Cindy has, so it's about 6 years. I know we came a number of years before the pandemic. It was nice to meet in person. Anyway, our cat, since people are telling cat theft, our cat has killed 2 mice in 2 days. Sweetie is a killer cat. But anyway, look forward to this conversation.
Thanks, Bill. Francie?
Hi, Francie Manning in Austin. And, you know, once in a while, I kind of like to argue. I'm sorry we can't. But I want Teresa to show me how to put those things on my screen. I always look forward to figuring out what your motif is each time I come. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Larry?
Hi, I'm Larry. I've started with the race about 1995. Good morning to everyone.
Morning. Michelle?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Michelle, and I'm also in Austin, and I've been coming to Erace since like summer of 2020. So look forward to seeing and hearing from everybody today.
Great. Marla?
Good morning, I'm Marla. I've been coming to Erace since, I guess, around 2019 or 2020, and looking forward to it.
Thank you. Glenn?
Peace be unto everyone. I'm Glenn Abdullah. I've been coming to Erace since 1994, so I guess I must enjoy it.
Thank you. Leonetta? You're muted, Leonetta.
My name is Lynetta. I've been a member of Erace since I was in my internship in undergrad.
Great. Thank you all for being here. So I'm going to go over the way we facilitate the meeting. I will keep a list of people who raise one finger and move it slowly back and forth. Make sure you can see it on your screen like I'm doing right now. If you can't see it in your own screen, I won't be able to see it. Then I'll put you on the list and I'll call the list in order. Periodically, I'll say who I've got on the list. And then if the person speaking says something that you do not understand the concept, the word, the idea, you can put up 2 fingers to ask a clarifying question. And the clarifying question does not need any preamble other than when you said such and such, what did you mean? It is not to kind of get into a back and forth with the person to challenge what they said. It's to clarify what they said. If your question isn't a clarifying question, you'll be invited to get on the list and say your idea when it's your turn. We don't allow any personal attacks, any insults, any name calling. We maintain that this should be a space of safety for everyone. And hopefully it will be that. If someone does cross the line, we'll call point of order, and then everyone has to be quiet and we'll regroup. Again, everyone should stay muted unless they're the one who has been called on to speak because they're on the list. And don't forget to unmute when you are called on. We ask that your cell phones are kept quiet just because when you are speaking, that can be a distraction. Otherwise, we probably won't hear it. So again, I'm Phyllis, and my cat is right beside me. Her name's Raziella. It's from a book I read called The Mercy of Thin Air, which is a kind of a ghost story set here in New Orleans, but a very unusual ghost story. I recommend it. I picked this topic today because, well, first I was thinking about finding an article about the abolition of the police. And then I saw a bit on the Daily Show where Roy Wood Jr. went to the forest that is talked about here where they want to build Cop City, and he interviewed some of the forest defenders. And I thought that was very interesting. And then I found this Al Jazeera piece with the 2 videos, which I hope everybody also got to watch because they're very informative. And I think Al Jazeera does good journalism. So some thoughts I had picking it was that this really brings in a lot of issues all at once. It's indigenous rights, oppression of Black people, the corporate involvement, the environmental protection and environmental justice issues. I was struck by the kind of history of this forest, that it had been indigenous land. The Muskogee Nation had lived there before they were displaced to Oklahoma. Then it was a plantation, then it was a prison farm. It's been a forest and a park where people in Atlanta go hiking. Unfortunately, also, it seems like a lot of trash was dumped there. And then now they want to make it a police training center so that the police can learn how to more effectively oppress the citizens. That's my take. So, anybody want to get on the list? Teresa? Michelle? Looking. Anybody else right now? Okay. Teresa, you're up.
All right, so I took some notes here because this was, I'm glad you brought this up. The first time I actually learned of this forest, which I've also heard called the South River Forest, was on a TV series called Atlanta, which I streamed on the platform Hulu. And if you've ever seen the series, the main character is a rapper, drug dealer, whatever. So I really thought the location was some drug-induced fantasy. I didn't know that that setting was an actual forest. And it was only maybe a month later I saw the same episode of The Daily Show that you did. And it's like, oh my God, all of that wasn't just drug-induced. That was an actual setting. And when I saw that, it was amazing to me. Well, I should say I'm too surprised. I'm surprised it hadn't happened earlier, because this is actually something that's good, a natural area. And the first thing I thought of, well, the first thing I thought of was environmental racism. And it's like, of course, they want to build this. If that forest was in a different zip code, there is no way in heck they would have Cop City in a wealthy zip code, first of all. And I was so surprised that it had stayed a forest this long, honestly. And the council member who said, oh, I've listened to a lot of feedback and I've never heard anything against. And I thought, you lying mofo, there is no way unless you're willingly not listening. So it made me think of Upton Sinclair's quote that says, it's difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it. And I thought it may not be his salary, but I definitely think I think it's like what, 5 corporations that are putting money into this. It's like he's getting kickbacks from some place. And the other council member who went on, who was interviewed, who stated that this was a way to bring jobs to the place. And like, oh, this will be, and that's the same rationale they say about prisons, those for-profit prisons, well, don't think that you're going to fill it up with all these poor Black and brown people, but oh, it's going to provide so many jobs to the area. And oh, is that the timer?
Yeah, do you want to get back on
I'd
the
like to
list?
get back on. Yes.
Okay. Michelle, you're next, then Greer, then Teresa again.
Yeah, it's funny. I almost picked this topic as my several weeks ago when I facilitated because I just heard about it. And so it kind of resonated with me in the same way it did for you, Phyllis, exactly. And I must say, when I heard about it too, I instantly went to a book I read a couple of years ago in the book club I used to be part of called The Overstory by Richard Powers. And I put a link to it in the chat, but it was very much, it's kind of along the similar lines in part of the story. It's about activism and environmentalism. And it had a section of the book about, by the way, it won the Pulitzer Prize in 2019. And it has a section of the book about a group of activists who live up in the trees up in the Pacific Northwest for a period of time to try and stop the degradation of the forest by the timber companies, basically. But that's just a small part of the story. I mean, the real root of the story is a small group of people, basically, who have the ability to see the connection between the trees and nature and the connection to all of us and to our environment and what it provides and the sustaining things that it brings to our environment. And I just thought it was a deep book to think about. And I instantly thought about it when I saw this story about this environmentalist who was basically murdered for his beliefs. So, and it's very troubling. Anyway, that's really what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Michelle. I've read The Overstory too. It's a very good book. I would recommend. Clarifying question, Bill?
You may have said this, may have missed it. The Overstory is not about Cop City.
Is this a question?
I've been asking a question.
Okay.
Is the Overstory about Cop City?
No, this is a couple of years ago. The book was written in 2018, and it won the Pulitzer Prize in 2019. It's a work of fiction, but it resonates on many levels to this story to the incident that happened in the forest and outside of Atlanta.
Thank you. You answered my question.
Okay. Well, Greer is next.
So I'm going to sort of piggyback on Teresa. They always want to build something that negatively either impacts the people or the environment where poor people live, as though they don't have a right to have a safe place to exist. But also, what they're building is tantamount to a military base in the middle of a neighborhood.
Bill, I got you.
This is insane. You're going to have housing for cops and all these other things that are going to be self-contained, which means you're using public money using public land to create something that all the public does not have access to, which is insane. And again, like Teresa said, the people who are okaying this don't have a stake in it because their neighborhoods aren't being affected at all on any level. It's like they say in the Bible, you know, this is what you do to the least of us. And with all these corporations being involved in corporate welfare and people being linked to this financially, it's double dipping. And nobody's seeing that either. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Greer. And yeah, the corporations are putting about 60 million of the 90 million that's needed into it. The rest, the other 30 will come from the people of Atlanta. Teresa, you're back on the list.
Okay, the last point that I had written down in my notes is it seems like there's always, when dealing with crime or how to best discipline people of color, there's always this emphasis on militarization rather than compassion. Instead of investing in wraparound services, which is something that I saw even as a teacher. It's like when I heard the expression playground to prison pipeline, it just made complete sense of how especially Black boys are punished for something that white boys are not. If a Black boy says something in response to a teacher, he's more likely to get suspended. Get suspended enough times, he gets expelled. A white kid can say something and he'll get a reprimand from the teacher, but it doesn't escalate beyond the classroom. And you learn really quickly, oh, I can't say certain things because I'll get in more trouble. Or when you're walking around past, I always, because I literally worked at a middle school in Denver called it MLK. And they've changed the name a couple of times, but they've kept the MLK. So it was a middle school, and then it was a efficiency academy or efficacy academy or something like that. But I always walked by just to see if any of my Black male students were sitting in the principal's office. And if so, I would always just like walk in. It's like, what did they get you for this time? Because it was always some like BS kind of thing. Oh, he was disrespectful, which is kind of like the trick bag for school of saying as resisting arrest. There's always some reason to get a Black kid. And I was the least teacher who would even send students because I would just talk to them. And it's just amazing how having a conversation and calling home and, you know, working with the high school counselor. Thank you.
Back on the list, Teresa? Okay. Bill, you're next, and then the list is open again.
Thanks for the article, Phyllis. It's one of a long history, as Greer alluded to, doing things that impact Black and brown neighborhoods. The Cleveland Overpass is a good example in our city. And when Cindy and I were involved in an effort to save the fly, save the Riverview in part of Audubon Park next to the river, they wanted to build a private soccer field in an area that was used primarily for Black families for family picnics. And the organizers this said, no one's using it. That's just like this, no one's using it, but the Black families were the primary users. And I was also disappointed to see the city council person who was supporting this was named Michael Julian Bond. And
he's Julian Bond's son.
I know that was
Yeah.
very disappointing. see Julian Bond's son supporting Cop City. Anyway, it's the same old, same old.
Greer.
I'm done for now.
Thanks, Bill. Greer, you're next.
They don't have policing done right at this moment with simple substations divided amongst cities all over the country where Black people are being subjugated to harassment, profiling. Now you're about to create a military city for policing. That's like policing on steroids. It's like insane. I'm just sitting here thinking, they're being surrounded by Black neighborhoods. So being that they're so close, those neighborhoods are going to be over policed, and Black neighborhoods are already being over policed. It's like trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma, being a Black citizen in the United States. That's it.
Thank you. Larry, you want to be on the list? You're next. Go ahead.
You had mentioned in your introduction about the oppression of Black people. I don't see it in that fashion. There are Black people who are crying out for police help. There are Black people who want something to be done about their 16 and 17-year-old kid getting shot down on the streets. And all police-Black relationships are not about evil white cops killing unarmed Black men. There are a lot of armed Black men also walking around in the neighborhoods, killing, murdering, robbing. And so we can't put all, the oppression of Black people, we can't put all of that in one category. Black people are a diverse group of people. It's not like it was 50 years ago. America has changed in terms of immigrants and everything else, of Blacks coming over to America. So to say oppression of Black people, that's very broad now, and all Black people don't fall under that umbrella. And again, just like we have police precincts in Black communities, all white communities, there's a cry in the Black communities for help. That's always the cry that goes up. Somebody ought to do something. And then time somebody do something, then we kind of get bent out of shape on it. So, in this case, I kind of have to trust the political leaders of Atlanta. That's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. Nancy, Louise, you're next. Anybody else?
Okay. Oh, I don't have to unmute, do I?
No.
So I just want to link something to what, link the article to what Larry just said. And I don't know if you know, but in New Orleans, one of my jobs, apart from being a tour guide in the French Quarters, was running an outdoor program for school students. It's now turned into the Loop program, which you need to look into if ever you have the time. Anywho, it's a fact that the hours after school to 7 o'clock or whatever is the time when kids will get into trouble of some kind. And you were saying that there are Black kids walking around with guns getting into trouble. Yes, absolutely. And the link is coming soon, don't worry. And these kids need some kind of a program or some kind of an outlet to go to. And the outdoor program was definitely that outlet, which had helped a lot of high school kids stay out of trouble and stay out of gangs. So this woodland area is utilized by the local community for such things. You know, one of the many, many, many reasons not to destroy it and to bring in complete opposite of what, you know, should be there. Anywho, that was it.
Thank you, Louise. Nancy? Greer.
To piggyback on what Larry and Louise just said, I think one of the objections of this, the response to crime is always more police and more policing and over policing, when they really don't take the time to look at the underlying causes of crime. And I think that's what people find so objectionable. And I can't believe that the people in power don't see the correlation between crime and underfunding services available to the community. I think one of the things that I don't see how they, maybe they do and they just don't care. I'm sure that's probably more the reason they do recognize, and they just don't care, because these are not unintelligent people. They are intelligent. They just don't care. But to the minimum wage, childcare, services, after school programs, they took away the truant officers in the public schools. And so therefore, when these children are out, a lot of them never return to school after school shut down during the pandemic and went to Zoom learning. And then when the schools reopened, I was reading an article about, I forget the number, but how many children did not return to school. And so they're out in the streets doing whatever. And what always comes to my mind is Linda Frickey, the woman, the 73-year-old woman that died when she was carjacked at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and her arm got trapped in the car, and she was literally dismembered by, I think they were 15, 16, and 17-year-old. That's a horrible sound. Oh my God. Okay, I'll stop.
Do you want to get back
That's
on the
my
list?
point. Maybe, not right at
Okay.
this moment.
Okay, thanks. I've got Greer, Teresa, Bill, and Michelle. So Greer, go ahead. And Glenn.
I'm going to sort of piggyback off of what Nancy said, because she just took the words out of my mouth. They always want to fix the problem from the policing side, never wanting to go to the source of what's going on. They never want to pour money into the problem, but you're willing to pour money into a police complex. That money could be better spent creating programs and using that land to build something where the community has access to get help. It could be a sports complex, having multiple facilities with social workers. You could have food banks, after school program, a child care facility, clinics. Just looking around New Orleans with all these kids spray painting graffiti on everything, you could channel these children's energy into doing something positive and also have the police presence there. We've gotten away from neighborhood policing to where you know who's in your neighborhood, not somebody just randomly coming through harassing. I remember being a kid and the police officers in my grandfather's neighborhood, because once he retired, he used to always like sit on his porch. And you know, he talked to people passing by. And sometimes after I got out of college, I would go and sit with him, and cops would pass by and they would be like, "Hey, Mr. Lou, how you doing?" And he'd be like, "Hey, John, hey, Raymond, how y'all doing? Tell your mama I said hi. That's what's missing from the community. The police aren't invested. If you aren't invested in keeping me alive and keeping me safe, why would I trust you to tell you anything when I gotta live next door to the criminal who potentially wants to kill me?
Thank you,
That's it.
Greer. Do you want to get back on the list?
I'm good. I'll hit you up if I need to get back on.
Okay. Teresa's next.
Okay,
Cindy.
responding to both Nancy and Greer,
got
I
you,
just wanted to
Cindy.
say, you know, they call them for-profit prisons. They're not called for-profit wraparound social services or whatever. If you could ever make a lot of money investing in wraparound services, then prisons, that's the direction we'd go into. I think also the media lens of just me seeing, you know, whenever I hear, and I think I've told this group before, I always play racism bingo. Whenever I hear like a headline before I see the perpetrator of said crime, you know, when they tell me that they capture a mass murderer alive, and that's like, oh, it must be white, because they don't capture, you know, and again, I'm playing racism bingo. I'm making a snap judgment on a media headline or whatever that I'm hearing before I hear all the facts. And so just that trial for the guy in Buffalo, he was able to kill 10 Black people in a grocery store and be captured alive. You have somebody like Sandra Bland who committed suicide in prison. I mean, when you hear of white people committing suicide, it's somebody like Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was a Black person. And I do think about also like R. Kelly. So if you're rich, or you know, you're white, you could be an average person, just like what this past summer, that couple who, I think she was an Instagram something or other, and he killed her. Well, again, me playing racist bingo, I was just like, oh, you know, he killed him. But then the police didn't have a reason to hold him. I was like, oh my God, if he was a man of color, y'all would have killed him when you stopped him the first time. And you got this guy and you didn't have a reason. There's so many more nuances to the law that I had no idea about until something like this happens. And then they find that he committed suicide, and it's like, okay. So those are dynamics that are at play. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Bill?
I wanted to briefly tell a story about how to deal with these situations. And I was told by a man from South Africa when there was a school in the Cape Town area that had 200 new windows put in. And the first night, the windows were all stolen. And so the government said, we can put up concrete barriers, we can send the military in to protect the school. And the community said, no, give us the money you would have spent on the military and let us figure out what to do. And the community built a brick factory adjacent to the school that employed the parents of the children. And there was a market for the bricks. And then another school that built a bakery that was employed the parents of the children. And every child went home with a fresh loaf of bread from the bakery. They had to pay for it, but it was a small amount. So if you let the community decide what to do with the situation, and the school was never, ever vandalized after that. It was never vandalized. So that's a fable. It's fable in this country, because that will sadly never happen. But I wish it would. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Next is Michelle.
Yeah, I was just, as I'm mulling over all the comments in here, it reminded me that of the TED Talk I just watched a couple days ago with Heather McGee. who was the author of The Sum of Us. I'm sure several of you on here are familiar with her body of work. But basically, her premise is that racism, the cost of racism basically harms us all, but the people that are white are unaware of how that's affecting them. And I just thought, a lot of her points were that, before the civil rights movement, there was a lot of social safety nets and infrastructure in this country that worked and was providing for the people that were, downtrodden or struggling in this country. And then the civil rights movement came along and supposedly created equity for people of color. And that's when everybody started rebelling and no longer putting money into these structures, instead, because it also benefited people of color. So one of her great examples, which I'd read about in another article, was the public pool in Mississippi, in a town in Mississippi, that was prosperous and people used it. And then the 1960s came along and there was a decision in the courts that made it illegal for them to continue to deny entrance to people of color. And when that happened, instead of just bending with the law and making that the case for everybody, that everybody could use it, they drained the pool and it never opened after that. And so it's the same with a lot of this infrastructure and again, with all of the daycare things that are put in place in other countries around the world, but we can't seem to get around the fact that if it's going to benefit anybody but white people, it's not going to be good for us. And that's exactly what's happening here. It's just another component of it. And I just thought her TED Talk, I'm going to put it in there. It was excellent. It explained things excellently. And so I encourage everybody to listen to it because it was really good.
Teresa. Thank you. Michelle, Glenn is next.
Yes, Black people can do something about it. If you put it into their hands, they can do something about it. And it's already, in most cases, it is in their hands. They vote according to skin color, they don't vote according to the content of a person's character. Some of them Black politicians on the city council voted for it, that they put into office. You see the same thing in New Orleans. They put a guy on a city council who had been caught stealing, taking bribes, went to jail for it, to come out because he's Black. They put him over an area where somebody was doing a good job and put him over because he was Black. They put a woman, which I brung it out into this, a woman who was a gambler, and put her in the office, and she stole funds. They put her in the office because she was Black. We got to start voting for people not according to their skin color, but according to the content of their character. That's my opinion. That's why we in the condition we in.
Thank you. You finished, Glenn? Good. Okay. Marla, you're next.
Okay, just a few thoughts that I wrote down. I'm sure someone else touched on it already, but just this ongoing false narrative that police presence actually prevents crime. That no crime or very little crime takes place if we have more police patrolling, which has time and time again been proven false. But yet we keep, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And I'm not sure why the facilities that Atlanta has right now aren't good enough. They have been using those same facilities from what I got from the article and the videos for years, but and are still one of the most heavily policed communities in the United States, if not the most heavily policed, with cameras and so forth. So that's curious. And then I wondered if anybody else noticed kind of the irony in the woman who, I can't remember her name in one of the videos, but was trying to save the forest from an environmental perspective specifically, but she said that the negotiation was, we will build you this, phenomenal walking path around the new police facility. And she said something to the effect of, that's great. Like, I want to hear gunshots, going off while they're training, while I'm on my peaceful walk. And that just reminded me of what Greer said, the trauma upon trauma upon trauma, like just immersing folks, Black folks back into that again and again. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Marla. Next is Larry.
Laws are made for the lawless. And from the standpoint of the police, they are hired to enforce the laws. It's not a social organization. Person get arrested, it's not up to the police to rehabilitate them. That's the judicial system or whatever else. Whether it's, who would have thought after Watergate that another politician would have gone crooked? But Watergate didn't stop crooked politicians. So whether it's crime in the hood, crime in Congress, crime on Wall Street, you got criminally minded people. You got criminally minded people. All crimes is not about poor people not having jobs and programs and things of that type. No, you got criminally minded people. You got people with jobs committing crimes, and so, we cry about police training, and yes, there needs to be more police training. You train a guy, you don't shoot nobody in the back when they're running away unarmed. You don't do that. That's evil. And so we want more done. And when you got people in office who that, despite whatever they may do, nothing is getting better, sometimes people get desperate and they put desperate measures in place. Maybe they don't all work. It's a trial and error situation. But you got communities crying out, help, help, somebody do something. Somebody do something. I'm afraid to send my child to school. Somebody do something. And so those who are in charge try to do something. But then when they do, we want to criticize them. Some things are a matter of trial and error. Some things work. Some don't. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Cindy, you're next.
I have a clarifying question.
Oh, sorry, Greer, go ahead.
Okay.
Is it a
Mr.
question
Larry,
to clarify something, he said, not to argue?
No, I
Okay.
just want to ask a question. Okay. Like you were talking about training. How much training do you think the police need? Like you said, someone to not shoot somebody in the back. Why is it that they always need retraining when it comes to how they handle African Americans as opposed to how they handle white people?
Because, Greer, I believe that when we look at the root of the police department in America, it was originally a slave patrol to patrol slaves and those newly freed slaves. And this mentality has lasted unto this day. That's why I think police need to be retrained on what their purpose and mission is. It's not to just bust Negroes over the head.
I have a clarifying question, Larry. Did you watch either of the videos embedded in the article?
I read the article.
Okay.
I didn't watch the video.
Okay, there's two videos. The second one kind of has some of the community people who are talking about the first video, which was the Al Jazeera report about the forest and the cop city. You might want to review that because you get to hear from some of the community leaders, like people on the ground and neighborhood people. Okay, so next I have Cindy.
this whole debate is typical of what happens ongoing in a community that's involved. Now, in New Orleans, maybe 20 years ago, 25 years ago, when the whole magnet schools started, before charter schools, before any of that, it goes back a ways. A group of parents get together. They're saying, we raise the money for the extra goodies. Our kids are doing well. We're happy with it. We support it. So they try to continue it and make it even better. It's very easy for other people to say, oh, no, you can't do that. It's a public school. Yeah, it is, but it's a particular area. It's a particular whatever. So they called it a magnet school, and they set the goals. The key was having a bunch of parents involved that would work together, raise extra money for materials that were not supplied by the system. The whole point was the involvement was the value. Not so much that they raised extra money, that was great, but it wasn't necessary. When you have a whole group involved in doing something that they share the values, you take care of most of the negatives. Now, certainly some things change. I don't know. I was at a school here that went through major changes. And again, I had retired, so I don't know exactly what went down. Things do change over time. But when you've got a group of parents involved with a shared goal, it's got to be good for the school. Whether that works long-term, it's hard to tell. So that's kind of sad. You can't count on it continuing. Enough said.
Thank you, Cindy. Next is Amal
Larry had his finger up, I think.
to get on the list. Okay, thanks. Amal is next.
Yeah, good morning. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yep.
Yeah, you know, when I read the article, as well as looked at the video, what was interesting is that this land once belonged to the native peoples of the Muskogee people.
Bill.
And, you know, of course, they were marched off their own land to Oklahoma. And now you have this area surrounded by a predominantly African-American community. And they're saying that they're going to build it, a $90 million project, despite how the people who live in the surrounding area feel about it. So what that says to me is that this is a land grab, something white folks have historically done, take land from indigenous as well as African people and put on it what they want to, and basically tell the African and indigenous people, we're going to build what we want to build here, despite how you feel about it. And there's nothing that you can do about it. And then when there's opposition from anybody from either of those communities, whether that be the indigenous American or African American community, those people end up dead. And so that's what I see going on in both the article as well as the videos, is that white people flexing their power. This is a land grab. And they're basically saying that there's nothing that anybody can do about it.
Are you finished?
Yeah, I'm finished.
Oh, thank you.
I'm sorry.
I didn't know if sound.
I should have
went
said
out.
I was finished. I just paused. I should have said something. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
But yeah, this is just white folks pulling a land grab and basically telling those two communities who the land belonged to that there's nothing y'all can do about it. Do something.
Thank you, Amal. Next is Teresa, then Stanton, then Larry, then Bill, and Bill's going to be the last person to speak, and then we'll go into the wrap up and have the 2-minute people and then the 1-minute people. So
Yeah,
go ahead, Teresa.
Thank you. I forget specifically what Michelle had said, or I think it was something about white people don't realize how racism affects them. And I would just say, all you have to do is look how decisions are made based on zip codes. I remember talking to a French woman who was in my Spanish class about it depends on which zip code you live in, on how things are run, including the schools. And as I was having this conversation, she was just shaking her head in horror just to, you know, just to believe. She said, I could go anywhere in France and live and raise children, and the schools in that area would all be equitable. And I was like, yeah, because you're not there. There's no impetus to, and from what she was saying, the whole concept of zip code and not having resources, just your regular resources. I think you were talking about the swimming pool and trying to prevent one group of people. That has been so encoded in how structurally we have set up. And I'm glad, I don't know where Pete Buttigieg is with, you know, his pursuit of trying to I don't even know how he's going to do this, but it almost seems at this point mission impossible, because our highways and roads were built with the intention of breaking up Black communities. And it's such a legacy in this country. And I find it just incredulous when people say there's no systemic racism. It's like, just look at the zip codes, just look at the highway systems. That's all you really have to do if you look at that, and how it has destroyed communities and underfunded other communities, and then say, well, if you're not working hard, then that's because you're lazy. How can you fight under-resourced, even if you vote, when the deck is stacked against you? I'm just done with that thought. Thank you.
Thanks, Teresa. Next is Stanton.
Yeah, just a quick rebuttal to something Teresa said, and then I'll get to my other point. I'm sure that the people who are of Algerian and Tunisian and North African descent living in France don't think things are terribly equitable everywhere in France. So just as a counter to that statement. Yeah, you know, I understand that nationwide we're having a problem with recruiting new police officers into police forces. And I'm assuming that has to do with the fact that they don't want to be accountable, and people don't like to be accountable for their actions when they have misdeeds. And now that there is a little bit more public awareness of the misbehavior of police officers in multiple police forces, you find people not willing to become new recruits. I have a particular personal bias against the police just in general. Growing up in Los Angeles, LAPD was a terrible organization at that time. I don't know what it's like today, but it certainly was bad in the 60s and 70s. And I would just say, I think it takes a certain type of personality who wants to become a police officer, people who like power, people who want to exert their power over other people. They like to intimidate. And I know there's the version of the altruistic cop and the person who wants to do good and the person who did rush into the Twin Towers. There's all those truths coexisting, and you know, there's no blankets that cover all people. But as a general statement, the kind of personality that I joined the Peace Corps, I don't think is the same kind of personality that joins a police force. And what I think we need to invest in is better psychological screening for potential new police officers and also for existing ones. And the money might better have been spent in developing those kinds of hiring techniques as opposed to this bullshit, you know, militaristic police academy that there, or whatever it's going to be that they want to build in Atlanta. So the money, again, it's not defund, it's redirect funds for the right purposes and to make the police force better.
Thank you, Stanton. Larry's next.
You know, this is almost like you got a background checks, and that's going to control the gun problems. You get a background check today and go ballistic tomorrow. So background checks are not the answer. And once again, whether it's Wall Street, Main Street, Congress, the urban cities, you got criminal minds. and people are going to do criminal things. This is where another aspect of training comes in at, the aspect that we want to dismiss, and that is the religious aspect. And regardless of what our take is on religion, religion, among other things, should be designed to address issues of morals and character, ethics, right, wrong, values. But if we want to stamp out all of those things, then just get rid of all the police force tomorrow and see what happens. We're going to be in total chaos. We think we got it bad now. So New Orleans led the country in murders in 2022, and I think there's been 1,000 auto thefts this year so far, and people are breaking into cars at the Saints games and the Pelican games. No, we got a serious problem, and it's the same thing across America. And we need the police force, but we don't need the kind that's racist and the kind that's going to shoot people in the back. But we do need the kind that's trained to know what their job is. I agree with most of what Stanton said. Thank you.
Thank you. Glenn, did you have a clarifying question?
No, I have my hand up.
No, sorry, the list is closed after Bill, who's
okay.
next. Sorry, he didn't hear.
I just wait.
Louise has a clarifying question.
Yeah, so Larry, so you agree with the building of the cop city?
Well, I'm not familiar with the particulars that's in the Atlanta area, but I would be in favor of the building of a facility that's going to better train police. Now where it's located, and this particular facility, I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Bill, you are next and the last one on the list.
One of the first, France is way ahead of us in many ways, but it's not perfect. There was a movement a while back to ban Islamic head covering for women. They said that was dangerous. And someone pointed out that the head covering for Islamic women was the same as the head covering for nuns, Catholic nuns. It was exactly the same covering. And so there was a bit of hypocrisy there. But the main thing, we certainly miss Walterine and sadly Dennis. Walterine and Dennis for the reasons we first came to Erace. But Walterine posted a quote from, it said, "Laws should be made to serve the people. People should not be made to serve the laws." And the person who said that was Huey P. Newton of the Black Panthers. And I agree with Larry that police need to be trained, but they need to be retrained. This quote should be in the police academy, because police need to serve the people. And the militarization of our police have doing quite the opposite. They're like an occupying army. And this academy seems to perpetuate that stance. Thank you.
That was great timing. Thank you, Bill. Okay, so we're going to go into the wrap up for the 2-minute people. And I have Dee Dee, Francie, Lynetta, and Marva. Is there anybody else who did not speak at all that I have missed? Okay, so Dee Dee, 2 minutes.
This is not going to take me 2 minutes. Okay. I've seen this kind of activity and like the undertow in this meeting, basically it's dollar signs. You know, where they can make the most amount of money and where they can use their power to override all of the social concerns and do exactly what they want to do. I mean, that's something of a moot point. We've seen it for years and years and years, and it's not going to stop. I think they need to spend some time on what they're training. And I think that's the scariest part of all of this, is it's starting to, like, if they train from a humanitarian perspective, then that would be great, but we can pretty much assume that they're not going to do that. And I think that's what a lot of the reaction is, and the hopelessness in the fact that you can't stop it. You know, they're going to do what they're going to do because they have the money. And so there they are. And so, I mean, this is like major deep-seated program issue in the United States. And I mean, it's lesser over here, but it's still in California as well. And so thank you for this meeting, bringing this topic up, because it does need to be aired out. And I'm done.
Thank
See,
you,
it told
Dee
you
Dee.
it would take 2 minutes.
Thank you. Francie, you're next.
Well, this was a great discussion. Thanks, Phyllis, for the article. I haven't watched the videos, but now I'm going to go back to watch them. I would say that the forest itself is worth preserving no matter where it is. Once again, climate change is not part of the issue, but an older forest is a much more efficient CO2 sink than young trees that we plant to replace older trees. The whole city benefits from what that forest contributes to the air quality, not just the neighborhood, but of course the neighborhood is entitled to that as well, maybe more so. So I'm big on the forest itself, no matter where it is, but it's a shame that these attacks on environmental quality are so often around poorer areas of cities, that those people always pay the bigger price. And kind of coattailing on Reverend Larry, I'm so surprised by how many evil people have crawled out of the woodwork, it seems, that they've been given permission by so much of the recent political conditions in the country to be unashamed. I'm really upset about that. And closed-minded people who, despite all the evidence, can't change their minds. That's it.
Thank you, Francie. Lynetta?
Phyllis, this is a wonderful article. Thank you so much. I've been trying to follow that article, what's going on, because green space has been proven over and over again that is a crime fighting tool. Trees and grass improves people's point of view. It helps lowers people's blood pressure. It helps the environment, and it helps with crime. And by this being indigenous land is more of a problem to keep it the way it is. I know the city of Atlanta has more land that they own other than that to put this facility there. And I also agree with what other people said, that there's other places in Atlanta that they could put this. It's a money grab. You always have to follow the money to find out what's going on with this politics. And I'm sorry that the young man had to lose his life. I hope his family gets some justice with him dying. And I hope his death serves a purpose. And I know Atlanta has a crime problem just like New Orleans do. And this green space will help in some way to lower that if they would let this go. And I agree with what other people have said about the police. The police system needs to be redone because it started as slave patrols, and the system itself needs to be redone. The police need to serve and protect everybody the same way. Not certain zip codes get one kind of protection and the other zip codes get the other kind. How much time I have?
About 30 seconds.
Okay. And I just wanted to tell Stanton that you opened my eyes with what you said last week about the your whiteness not protecting you from being harassed. And I just wanted to let you know that I called, I sent an email to a organization here in New Orleans called Lazarus. It helps gay people dying, and I volunteered because what you told me really stuck to me. I really want to help.
I love social workers. Okay, Marva is next.
Thank you for this topic. I enjoyed everyone's input and views. Policing is continues to need working on in improvement. And here in New Orleans, we have a lot of work to begin. Or from the top to the bottom. And we have to look at the people in charge. Thank you.
Thank you, Marva. Now we'll go into the 1 minute people. We'll start with Stanton.
Yeah, I just want to respond to something that Francie had said about, this new wave of political evil that we've seen. I think it's always been present. I don't think it's ever gone anywhere. I think that we just maybe allow a little bit more permission every now and then, depending on what's happening politically. But, something that is frequently brought up by Pedro about the country and where we are as a country and what we do internationally and what we have done. And so, yeah, I mean, society is just a bigger picture than the individual topics that we bring. And there's a lot of crap that goes on in the world, and people are basically just creatures, and there is good and bad, and we got to just keep striving to make it better. That's all.
Thank you, Stanton. Cindy, you're next for the 1 minute wrap up.
Again, interesting discussion. I'm not sure any of us expect there to be a quote answer that solves it all, but it's something we work on, we move toward. Maybe we get some new insights as we talk to different people and look at different possibilities. But I think staying open to possibilities and looking for answers is one of the most important things we can do as members of this culture. And maybe we can find some solutions along the way. Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. Nancy?
Very interesting topic, because initially I kind of wasn't understanding what the point was, but very interesting. And I think that more emphasis should be placed on basic services for the average person, and not so much attention being paid to or big businesses and wealthy people benefiting off the government. And that's kind of basically what's happening. Look and see who is going to benefit from this facility being built, what construction companies and what staffing agencies and so forth like that. It's going to benefit from this. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Teresa?
Yeah, I wish the community good luck, although they are up against a lot of formidable opponents. One, of course, is the corporations and the money, and then there's the police. And there's also this belief, widespread belief, not among Black people, but it seems everyone else, is that, oh, we're going to be safer if more Black people are either locked up or more closely watched or monitored or policed. And just I mean, the first time I ever heard of stop and frisk, I was horrified. And then the people not being stopped and frisked thought it was the most wonderful thing. Oh, this is great. So that horrifying belief is also an opposition. And I don't know how you fight that. It's not just profitability as far as money. It's really a deep-seated belief for that other people have, that if we just police the hell out of Black people, we'll be safer.
Thank you, Teresa. Bill?
Yes, Teresa said, you talked about stop and frisk. The mayor who initiated that practice was Giuliani. And New York was he may have been not the only one, but Giuliani instituted that practice in response to a crime rate in New York. And look where he's gone now. So great discussion, great article, Phyllis. It's sadly, as I said, same old, but it's nice to have a discuss. I learned a lot from the discussion. Thanks to everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Larry?
I just want to throw something in, food for thought, that when we think of Black America, you know, systematically, we've always thought of the disadvantaged descendants from slaves. America has changed over the last 50 years, so we just can't group all Black Americans into one category. You know, the immigrants that have come over from Africa and the Caribbean, the native Blacks who have moved up the economic ladder. You've got more Black men gravitating to the Republican Party now, not because they're in love with Trump or the Republicans, but they're just rejecting some of the traditional ideas. So we have to be careful not to just lump all Black people into the same category. And relative to that, you know, the video and the people on the ground, I'm a person on the ground too. And I think I could put myself on the ground and also give, you know, give my opinion. But Black America has changed. And that's something that we have to keep in mind when we talk about Black America. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Next is Marla.
Yeah, thanks for bringing this forth. I think the greatest takeaway from me from all of this is that in the United States, the ongoing practice of talking about how we are for the people and that everybody's represented and all opinions matter, and not in this instance, the community is very clearly saying what they don't want, and leadership is doing the exact opposite. And to me, that is the most distressing part of all of this. And it further demonstrates just the continued deterioration, I think, of efforts to reclaim our humanity, you know, as individuals and as a community. So that's my greatest concern. I'm still hopeful. I traveled by plane this week, and I will say that there were some very bright, big, you know, awesome bright spots, but there are other things that are really distressing, you know, and people's total lack of regard for each other. So anyway, happy Mardi Gras. Have a great week.
Thanks, Marla. Michelle, you're next.
Yeah, just a few thoughts here, just to wrap it up for me. I will say that if you were to go and talk to the women who founded Black Lives Matter, they would have a very different perspective on whether or not we need more policing, and the communities that have sprung up from that would have a very different view of that. And like Leonetta had mentioned, you know, we need to rethink policing, and I think the key term for me has been reimagining public safety rather than rethinking policing. We need to reimagine what public safety looks like in this country, and that's very nuanced and broad and has a lot of things that need to be worked on. But as a community, we need to come together, because I think personally retraining the police has been tried, and they still don't get it, because fundamentally, like Larry said, it's been, you know, it's based on a system that was a slave patrol in the beginning, and we haven't gotten beyond that ideal. And I don't know how white people in this country can get beyond that ideal, or white men, I should say, because they're still at the top of the ladder and they don't want to give up that power. So we need to come together as a community is key here, and that's just not happening. We're still working on an individualistic level. We've become too polarized.
Thank you, Michelle. Louise, you want to do your 1 minute?
So yeah, many different types of racism, and this is a prime example of the environmental racism. And I just hope that some of this publicity that this community is getting might stop them doing what they were wanting to do. And just as Teresa said right at the beginning of this conversation, that man, I think, and Marla mentioned him or mentioned it, that I think he was from the mayor's office, that said, oh yes, I've talked to a lot of the people, some of the people, I've been everywhere, here, there, everywhere, talking to people. It's like, no, you haven't, and you're not listening. And that's what we need to do. You know, as you said, it's the decisions made for a community that are not people in the community, and they're supposed to be responsible for that community. So that sucks. Also, I really, really encourage you to look up Loop program, especially people in New Orleans, the Louisiana Outdoor Outreach Program, and see if you can help in any way with that. It's an amazing program. And again, back to what we were saying about the roots of problems, getting the youth off the streets and giving them direction and made them feel worthy of something other than joining a gang and getting quick money from drug selling. I think that's one of the ways to go. And yes, that's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Louise. Next is Glenn.
There are millions of acres of forest in America that is protected. This area is not a protected area. And the ones who made the video, they tried to work on your emotions, telling you this, they're trying to cover up that this used to be a slave place where they used to torture slaves at. And then it want to include in there a dump that's not even in that area, but it's a dump. You know, they boxing it all in. Now I'm gonna tell you, police need training, but the training that tells them that, you know, that, well, anyway, I can't get into that. It's gonna take me too long to get my thinking process on it. But this, I'm agreeing with, they do need some more military training, not for Black people, but for those white folks that attack the Capitol, that type of group. They're the problem in the future, and we better have a police force that can deal with it. That's it.
Thanks, Glenn. Greer?
In America, we spend more money on housing prisoners than we spend on an individual's child, public education. And that's a very sad thing, because I think it was Teresa said, we don't see a return investment on the kids being educated and having access to everything they need. But the return is a good citizen. Like anything, even with police and religion at heart is pure. But when man taints it with its own bias and prejudices, then it ceased to be what it's actually supposed to be. And that's what policing is. Policing is supposed to be you want to protect your community, having it safe for yourself and other people and your family. Police right now is far from being that. It basically, they're the biggest legalized gang in America. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Greer. Amal, you're next and last.
Yeah, the area that they're trying to build this facility on, that's green space. It's called green space for a reason. And I think people fail to realize that those areas are supposed to stay that way, that you're not supposed to tear down the trees and all of not be considerate of the animals that live in there, or the soil and all of those things. It's green space. It's supposed to stay that way. I guarantee you that if you tried to go into a white neighborhood and interrupt their green space and build a $90 million facility just for the quote unquote training of police officers, this wouldn't even be a conversation. But because of the people who live in that area and who surround that area, it's, once again, this is a land grab. And this is white folks flexing their muscle and saying, I dare you to do something about it. And that's been the problem. White folks taking land without consideration of the people who live there.
Thanks, Amal. Thanks, everyone, for participating in this conversation. I'm going to go over some notes I made because I took notes on both the videos and I underlined things in the article. There's a lot. So when I was first looking into the topic of Cop City, I came across a podcast where Kamal Franklin, who is in the second video, he's actually at the end of the first video too, speaking to in a protest, but he is the executive director of Community Movement Builders in Atlanta. And I didn't use that podcast because the host of it was not very organized in the conversation, and I didn't think it would really serve us, but I liked what Kamal Franklin had to say, and I was glad that he showed up in the second video as a panelist to discuss the first video. And he makes a lot of good points. And the woman who does the ecological stuff is Jacqueline Eccles of the South River Watershed Alliance. To Black people in the community in Atlanta. The second video, well, the first video and the second video, they show people who live in the neighborhood of the proposed Cop City, and none of them are interested in having to hear explosions and gunfire from 12 different firing ranges, which are proposed. In their neighborhoods, one man they already have a firing range near there, and he said his dogs get really spooked. They've run away when the gunfire starts. Because unlike 4th of July, you can't predict when that's going to happen and put your dogs inside. The guy from the mayor's office or city council, Dustin Hillis, who said he hasn't heard any complaints, he's an outright liar, because they said 70% of the comments received by the city were against the project. He also said that the forest is not old growth, as if that doesn't make those trees important. This green space and 3 others are considered the lungs of Atlanta. If those trees go away, and who knows what they would do with the other spaces eventually, if they're in Black areas, the city is going to get hotter. It's going to have more flooding. It's going to affect everybody eventually. So as somebody said, Atlanta is one of the most surveyed cities in the United States. There is a lot of food insecurity there and a lot of homelessness. It would be lovely if these organizations, these corporations were offering up $60 million to help feed and house people in Atlanta instead of try to police them, because it is an absolute lie that more police and more police training makes anybody safer. That's a delusion. Somebody said the Black politicians are not working for the people. It's very disappointing that the son of Julian Bond would be involved in supporting this. I think what we need to do is we need to envision a society that we want in the future. And somebody else says that in the video. And this constant, well, we just have to retrain the police. That's not happening. The coalition, there's a coalition of folks suppressing Cop City. The arrests have become more violent. They are now being charged with domestic terrorism, which is the same, some of the same charges the guy who killed 11 people in Buffalo got. So I think there's a big difference between the two things. In Atlanta, all police are required to have on body cameras have their body cameras turned on whenever they're interacting with the public. And the ones who killed Tortuguita allegedly didn't have theirs on, or they're refusing to give it up. We've seen over time how often cops lie to cover up their own crimes. And the clampdown on these protesters is a dangerous precedent. It's criminalizing the movement. And they are using the language of Southern segregationists, calling the people in the forest outside agitators. And so for those who didn't watch the second video, first of all, this neighborhood where the Black community members are speaking from, there's already a youth prison, a landfill, and police firing range, and something else. I think it's some sort of a factory or something in that area, not in the forest, but in that general neighborhood. And they're already don't like all of those things. And, you know, having a landfill near where you live causes a lot of health problems. They will have mock villages, mock cities, so that they can learn how to go into urban areas and attack people. There will be explosions going off. There will be a landing pad for a Black Hawk helicopter. And I gotta say, one of the things that drives me about parades in my neighborhood is the Coast Guard flying helicopters up and down St. Charles and my area. It's like constant during parades. And I know they're out there just to keep an eye on the parade route. I know they're not to threaten anybody, but I hate the sound of helicopters. I cannot imagine having to listen to a Black Hawk land repeatedly. I think things. Oh yeah, and basically this training center is going to be used to train cops to stop uprisings, because they know that's coming. In my opinion, that's really coming. The idea that training cops in this way is improving public safety is BS. What Marla said about police not stopping crime, 100%. They sometimes commit it more than they stop it. And I would just say that the reason so many Black men are migrating to the GOP is because they're choosing their gender over race and over Black women, because the GOP is not for Black women. And yeah, I think there's that Teresa, the quote from Upton Sinclair, was it, that you shared in the beginning? I think that's a really good quote that all of us should look into, is like, how does our own security, like a man's paycheck, how does it influence how we think about things? So I hope that those who didn't watch the video, either of them will go back and watch the people who live in the community actually see what they say. And I'll trust those people before I'll trust a politician being paid by corporations any day. So again, thank you all. I'm going to stop the recording and then we can do announcements.